Hey, what's up, C3 Squad? Welcome back to the C3 podcast. A little bit of an update for you on this podcast version. So normally, as you guys know, it's video. This one's going to be audio only, as there was some syncing issues with the video and the audio. And so I just didn't want to post it because, you see the video and the audio is going to be all off and people were going to be talking at the wrong time. So I figured let's just go back and do audio only. So this one's audio only, but of course, still a great conversation. Can't wait for you guys to hear it. We'll see you next time. Code and Conversation, or as we affectionately call it, the C3 podcast. And this is, kind of kicking in the new year, right? So by the time you guys see this, we'll be well into 2021. So happy New Year, everybody. Hope it's been going great for you, despite some of the things we got off to a rocky start. But you know what? I'm gonna keep it positive, man. We're gonna make it through this year, man. This is not gonna be a repeat of 2020. But I am super excited about this podcast. And I say that a lot. I know my followers always tell me, it's like, Dave, you said that about every guest. I was like, it's just, like certain, not that I like some guests more than others. I love all my guests the same. It's like your kids, right? That's what you tell them until they go to sleep. But no, I just, whenever there's just a good connection and good energy, man, I get excited about that because I just know it's going to be a good time. And this one specifically, this special guest, man, me and Dutch, I think the special thing about it, and I'm going to tell a little bit of the story, then I'm going to let Dutch introduce himself, is like, me and Dutch haven't known each other for very long. We just kind of hit it off, right? Yeah. Literally like one conversation, if we were just like, and then like just going back and forth, hanging out. It always helps when you're hanging out in Vegas.
Right. It was pretty cash. Yeah.
Right. Like pre before it was like, a bad thing to be around people, right? Before the world exploded. We just, we met at a common employer at the time, and I don't know, man. I've just loved having the conversation with him. So I'm super excited to have him on the pod. Welcome, sir.
Man, I am excited to be here.
So, everybody gets their round of applause. But yeah, go ahead and introduce yourself to everybody out there listening.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me on. Dutch Schwartz. I'm a cloud security strategist. And so what I spend my days and nights doing is work with CISOs and their teams and helping take that security strategy they had probably on-prem or in hybrid and moving it up into the cloud.
Moving it into the cloud, man. That's where everything's going. Yeah. That's where everything is. Cloud is eating the world when it used to be software. Now it's just clouds. And for all those people who are non-technical, what are you talking about? The clouds are attacking us? What? First we had murder hornets, now the clouds are eating us? What's going on? But yeah, man, so when this finally got on the books, so Dutch and I have been talking about this for a while, and I was just like, yeah, man, we got to find a way to get you in the pod. And then, life happens. Everybody gets it, right? We get busy, stuff like that or whatever. And then finally I was like, he sent me a text. I was like, no, we're going to make this happen. I was like, I am emailing the scheduling person right now. We're going to get you on the pod. Let's make this happen. And I text him as soon as I saw it popped up on my calendar. I was like, it's going. Yes. And so I was like, I was so excited. I was like, there's so many things I wanted to talk about. But like the first one I wanted to get into was, so you put me on to, kind of one of the best podcasts that I found last year, which was Broken Record.
Oh, awesome.
Right?
Yeah.
And we'll kind of get into this for everybody else, right? Sure. The other thing that Dutch and I share, which is a love of music, right? And hip hop specifically. But so he puts me into this podcast, Broken Record. If you guys haven't heard it, go check it out. And it's Rick Rubin, like interviewing different artists, right? And just kind of talking about, what their style is and just kind of what they're thinking. And it's so super cool because you have two, if you don't know much about music or, Rick Rubin is probably like, not probably, like is like one of the genius producers of this generation.
No doubt.
Right?
And across genres, right? Which is really hard.
Which is, when you're not into music, that's a really hard thing to do. To be able to go from making like a country song to a folk song to a hip hop song. So this guy, to rock, right? He's worked with just about any major artist you can think of, or whatever genre. Like, I don't care what you listen to, like Rick Rubin's probably produced a track for.
Yeah.
This guy is that into it. So it's always interesting listening to these interviews because you get these super creative people, right? And the way they think and the way they see the world. So I want to talk to you about, did you hear the last one I listened to was with him and Pharrell?
Oh yeah, man, that was tight. It
Man.
was good stuff, and there's some stuff in there, and I keep, I think I've been a fan of the genre for a long time and just music in general, but still, it's so cool because I think Rick also has this kind of Zen Buddhist vibe, so people just open up to him, right?
Mhm.
And he just asks like really cool questions, and yeah, there's some great stuff in there. Like I didn't really remember the Teddy Riley, Neptunes
Yeah.
and then it all clicked when I was like, oh, that's right, because Teddy left, the city, and then he moved. So yeah, every time, like every single one, and like you said, and I'm not as into country and some of the other genres, but it doesn't matter because he talks to the artists, and it just every time it comes up a really cool something in there. You're like, wow, that's so interesting, like how they get into it, or what moves them, and yeah, man. So what did you like about that episode?
For me, the biggest thing that I liked was listening to Pharrell kind of talk about his process, right?
Yeah.
And like the one that stuck out to me was when he was explaining how I forget what track it was that really inspired him, but the fact that like he said when he listened to it, he
Oh
saw
yeah.
colors, right?
Yeah.
He saw
Right.
the
Right. Right.
colors of the sounds that they were trying to make, and like just his whole way of looking at the
Mhm.
world, like through this lens of his creative process of being able to see colors and like this is the mood it's putting me in and this whatever. And listening to Rick Rubin just being like, yeah, man, yeah, like
Right, like,
hearing
they
that
got it. Yeah, it
vibe.
was so cool. Yeah, it's like those people when you're like, "What color do you see when you think of the number 2?" And they're like, "Blue." You're like, "What?" Like, they have this kind of this kinda I don't know, it's almost like a kinesthetic version of how the
Right.
rest of us, I guess, see the world. They weave all the rest of the senses in there. Yeah, no, they were totally simpatico. I mean,
Yeah.
and it didn't come across like they knew each other really well before the
Right.
interview, but, oh, you could see right away. It was so interesting that they and then what they're striving towards is getting it to ultimately feel like what they felt when they started the process. That's
Yes.
so cool to
Right.
see that's what they're aiming for. Whereas it feels like some people more like a technician,
Yeah.
I know, like the drum needs to sound like the hi-hat's off, like they're kind of technically gifted. It's these guys are like sort of like, I hate to say it, but just like sound artists, right? They
Yeah.
have these colors and then they're trying to get those to come out. And that's how you get that creativity. It's so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they are, man, because I was like, I listened to how Pharrell would explain his process, right?
Mhm.
And it's like for him, it's all about a feeling,
Oh
right?
yeah,
I want,
100%.
I want it to feel like this,
Right.
and him taking that into, having that theory and technician part behind him to go, okay, I want to feel like that. What chord makes me feel like this? Let me play with this chord, right?
Right.
Now
Right.
let me add these
Yeah.
drums or these things to see if I'm still getting the feeling, and talking about like how he works with different artists and will work with them to say, okay, what do you, again, like what are you feeling, what type of
Right.
feel do you want to have for this, whatever. So it was just, man, it's just it's super interesting, and it made me kind of think to myself. I was like, that's the interesting thing about creatives,
Mhm.
right? And I think one of the things that I would say in society that we're learning to accept, right, is that creatives just literally see the world differently,
Are we
right?
doing does this happen?
Oh
Okay.
yeah, this is happening. Oh yeah, buddy.
Yeah, so do you think that that's something that we've kind of gotten away from and we're rediscovering that, or like what's the vibe to you on like I do feel like there's a little bit more of I hate to say, yeah, like a spotlight or kind of an appreciation for creatives plural, right? Like the sort of
Right.
the historic painter, artist, whatever, but I think there's a little bit more when people use that term sort of like a lowercase c, like it's a
Yeah.
way of approaching stuff. Like you can learn to be creative.
I think it's, we without getting super deep into it, right? But so high level thought process of how I've looked at it, right, is if you go back to like the Renaissance period,
Mhm.
where it was really more embraced, and it wasn't seen as, it was seen as different, but not quite as different for a painter or a sculptor or a philosopher to kind of go off and just kind of do their thing,
Mhm.
right? And go and be that, kind of creative and understand that process and bring that back to the world. I think in the modern world, we've kind of gotten away from that because we systemized everything
Mhm.
so much, right? Like, I would say enterprise and business kind of took over from that creative aspect where it's like, look, I want to, I liken it back to like Ford, right?
Mm,
Kind of creating that process of assembly line type of structures. Like, look, I want to be able to do something, master it, and then multiply it as fast as I can.
sure.
Because what we saw was that creates industry, right? That creates, economies of scale, right? And so we kind of, you can't really scale a creative, right? It's like,
Mhm.
why are, Picasso's or whatever so rare? Because it's like, I don't mass reproduce it. Like, here it is. It's this one thing.
Yeah.
And so that creative process, like, just it leads you to kind of, like I said, interact and see the world a little bit differently. So as we move towards this kind of like enterprise kind of structure in society, I think we disconnected from that. And so I think we kind of wrongly kind of shaped and boxed the creatives into this different kind of area, right? Into almost
Mhm.
where they're, you know, um, to really kind of make people think like we labeled them like autistic or Asperger's or like all these things like, yo, you're different. And we kind of put this bad connotation on it. It's like, they just see the world differently, right? And so that's what I think. And so I think what we're seeing is, as these, because I'm seeing it with brands such as like Nike or Adidas, like as they're looking to go out and get these influencers to kind of come in. And a big thing right now on athletic deals is like, you see these, a lot of these celebrities want, creative control. Like they want to be able
Mhm.
to, hey, we want to partner with you to create something. And you start to see them reaching out and hiring different people to come in and like lead creatives and stuff like that. And so I think with the onset of social media, the things like this, right, what we're doing right now, right, the ability to go and create your own content, we're empowering people to say, hey, you can be creative. We're going to give you the tools and we're going to give you a platform to do it. So that's, to me, that's why I think it's this small little kind of renaissance of that coming back. I don't quite know if we'll ever get
Yeah,
back
that's
to the
interesting.
renaissance period, but I don't know. I think it's interesting.
Well,
That's
so you made me think of three things. One, you're right that, like, I remember in high school, English class, and we're studying E. E. Cummings, right? And I remember distinctly the teacher saying, what do you think he meant? I don't remember. It was up so many floating bells down. It was around pick one, right?
right.
And I remember that the question struck me as odd, right? And I kind of argued with the teacher. I'm like, I have no idea what he meant. I can tell you what I feel when I
Right.
read it. It sounds cool. It makes me happy, but I don't know. Like, so I kind of pushed back on the whole, like, I think dissecting it too much, that kind of a thing, you take all the life out of it. And I
Yeah.
don't know how that hits me. Probably not the same way that it hits David. I don't know. Maybe if it does, it's cool. Or if it's like similar but not quite the same, that's even better, right?
Right.
So I think you crush something out of that by dissecting it too far. And to your point about creatives, I think creativity, you're right. I think there's a tendency early on, and both as parents and probably as school teachers, to throw that label out. And then, I have some of my kids are more inclined to draw or paint or do whatever.
Right.
It doesn't mean the other ones are not creative, and so
Right.
I will,
Absolutely.
I will admit I was late to the party, realizing, gosh, that's not really how it works. Like, everybody is creative. And now that might not be something that at age 5 speaks to you, like maybe pencil or music isn't a thing, but everybody has that. And I think that we lose collectively as a community if you don't let everybody know everybody's creative. Like, you just have to figure out what that is. I mean,
Right.
maybe with you, it's using chainsaws to cut ice. Like, I don't know.
Right.
I don't know how you ever made that discovery, by the way, but so to say that, and I think, and then we exacerbate it in our industry because we're so focused on, tactical, tangible knowledge, and I'm an expert, and I have,
Right.
and I get the impetus to your point, right? Because to make a business run, you have to have predictability, you have to have repeatability, all
Yeah.
those things, right? But if you do it too far at the expense of creativity, then there's no innovation, right?
Right.
So and to your point about the pod and this and all this medium, and this is not my idea, so I want to give credit where it's due. So it was, Dr. Hasib, and I was talking with him on a session like this, and he said, the thing about this is this democratizes people's ability to put their own brand out there.
Yeah.
And we had a really interesting discussion. It was a group of us, right? And then I noticed there are some people that I've talked to who are uncomfortable with the word brand, right? Especially technology people. I'm like, look, brand, you always had a brand.
Right.
Brand is just the stuff people said when you left the room. You always had a
Exactly.
brand, like, so if that word bothers you, then just think of it as that's your reputation, whatever
Right.
that is, right? And so I think that in a weird way, all of us being stuck inside, like now there's this flourishing of podcasts and live streams and meetups, etc. Um, it gives people a voice,
Yeah.
and so you can, and that's what Dr. Haseeb was saying is, it always used to be the brand, like the company, like that was what really drew everybody, and now you're seeing this. I don't know if it's really flipped the script, but I mean, it's definitely given people the opportunity to come out. And I've talked to multiple people who claim they're introverts and they're like, but here I have a voice, whether
Right.
it's, maybe they're not on camera, maybe they're just involved, but I think it's awesome. And I don't know where it goes either, and how much but I think it really has sparked creativity for a lot of people. And that's awesome.
Yeah. And you know what, the interesting thing about that is that it kind of creates this interesting pull, right, between
How so?
how generally enterprises like to run with their employees and things of
Mm,
that nature, right? And now it's like, you're absolutely right with the reputation thing, right? It was always there, right? It's just we gave it a different word. Now you want to call it a brand. That's cool or whatever. But um you know historically, right? Like if you wanted to get into public speaking, right? And so your company would send you somewhere, and you go on the stage or whatever. Now you can send a virtual whatever. But the point is, it's not your brand. You are representing that company's brand, right?
mhm.
And over the last, for me, I would say the last couple of years, because this is the only time frame that I've actually really been involved in it, right? When I started speaking more, things of that nature, and kind of going out, you start to realize it's like, yeah, well, this is more about my reputation and my brand, right? And what I represent in conjunction with that company. And so
Right.
what you kind of get is that kind of conflict of interest of like, okay, well, is it, are you speaking at this event because this is good for you, or is it good for the company? Right. And so now it causes this, what I always love, these uncomfortable conversation moments of, hey, let's discuss, what this is, where it could be a win-win situation where the company can say, look, it behooves us because it helps our brand to
Mm,
help you elevate yours, right? And I think and I've seen some contentious issues with that, right? But I feel like the companies that are embracing that say, hey, look, we have a person who has a brand whose voice is powerful enough that it attracts attention. So let's put our resources behind it. Let's
mhm.
help curate and nurture that voice. Give them a little flexibility to kind of have their own outside of it, but it benefits both parties, right? But it does kind of, like I said, it does kind of create this interesting dynamic where it's like, okay, well, hey, like, you're going to go do this on behalf of us. And it's like, yeah, well, maybe, right? Like
Right.
that's
Right.
not good with my brand or you or the company's brand and things like that. So it kind of comes down to that, because truly what is interesting, right? And it's I think it's always interesting to talk about, and people kind of cringe when you think about it this way. But if you look at the way, especially in the tech industry, employment, I call them contracts or whatever, but the employment contracts are set up, right? Because you
Sure.
do sign like your non-disclosures, all this stuff, whatever. Like it's common ground within tech, right? Like, so you work for a tech company, and while you work there, all your intellectual property that you think about is theirs. Like, what? Wait a minute. So if I have a good idea because I'm inspired by something I'm doing at work, it is now automatically yours, right? And we've signed up, and we just signed to that and go, okay, cool. Now you're starting to get to the point where, with brand building, or just people, kind of getting their platform, it's like, hey, like these thoughts are mine, and my takes and things of that nature. Like, I'm happy if I'm satisfied with my company to do this to help the company grow. But where does that kind of draw the line? And you start to get coming back to music, you start to kind of get this interesting area that music went through over the last 10 or
Sure.
15
Sure.
years, where artists are kind of like, hey, like, I'm not gonna let you label take everything. Like, I'm the artist here. Like,
Right.
how can I make sure that I get more of what I'm producing,
Mhm.
versus the labels like, hey, but we spent the money to make sure that you could get the best
Mm.
producers, you could get the
Right.
best engineers,
Enabled you. Uh,
you
yeah.
had a
Sure.
tool to go to the videos and all that stuff or whatever, right? And so I just think, to me, I just think it's interesting, right? We're kind of seeing this rise of the content creator, but that also goes like with the gig economy, the ability that you as a individual can connect to these platforms and streams and start to create this this presence around yourself that is based on you, based on your intellectual property, and how that's managed in an enterprise world that we live in, right? Causes a little bit of friction. So
Yeah, it's interesting because you're right. I think like we feel like, and it's good to go to other industries. So that's worthy of some more thought. But to your point, um, it has to be authentic. That's the key to whatever it is, right? And when when I'm talking with other people about public speaking or being or whatever the kind of the forum is, I'm like, look, just like it is with a kid, right? Like by the time a child is 2.5, 3 years old, right? Look, when one person says no and they listen, the other person says no and they don't listen, that's authenticity, right?
Right.
Now, they can't, right? They're not able to tell you what that is, but they know, oh, when Aunt Marge says that, she means that. Right? When Uncle Fred says that, nah, whatever.
You don't really mean it.
Because they base it on behavior, right? So like you don't have to spend a ton of time prepping and how do I do that? I mean, sure. I mean, you can do research and try to figure out, okay, how do I want to make sure? But at the end of the day, none of that really matters because it's about your authenticity. So whatever that is, right? I mean, you just have to, and maybe it takes you 10, 20, 30 to kind of find your voice, as they say, right? And figure out what that is.
Yeah.
But whatever that is, like just stick with that because that's what connects you to people, right? At the end of the day, music, painting, all of the art forms are about telling stories.
Yes.
About telling the story. That's how humans communicate, right? And so being authentic is the easiest way to tell a story, right? So if you tell people, hey, just like don't overthink this. Like you don't have to overthink it when you go and talk to somebody in a casual setting, at your family barbecue or at your neighborhood church or what. Like you don't overthink that.
Right.
You start talking. Well, what do you do? Well, you find either I know nothing about you, so I start asking questions that are easy, and we kind of, oh, you like the Cubs? I like the Cubs. Oh, I hate the Cubs. I mean,
Right.
and it flows naturally. It should be the exact same way. So whatever it is your area of interest is, like again, I tell people, like, and you don't, I struggle with the word expert, right? You don't need to be an expert. It's and depending on what you're trying to convey, you want to have expertise, you want to have understanding, maybe, or a viewpoint. Right. And the viewpoint is really critical. And one of the things I think about is loving music. There's a lot of really engaging artists who are technically not great singers. They're not. Right. And, I mean, and you can think of music as soon as I said that. Right.
Nope.
But they have a vision. They have a point of view. And so that's the other thing when I think about like when people are writing or in front of a camera, or I'm like whatever your point of view is, David, that's your point of view.
Right.
Like nobody can take that away from you. Like your unique way of looking at that. We can disagree. We can argue. I can say, oh, hell, that's a great idea. Right? It's you, right? And so that's like, you should be comfortable owning your point of views, right? So I don't have to be an expert on XYZ, but I have a point of view on that.
Right.
And that's what's engaging to people, right? Look, Madonna, technically not a great singer. Janet Jackson, technically not a great. Oh, they're good, right?
Right.
they're not terrible, but like I could push the analogy even further, right? Bob Dylan, right? Bob Dylan's voice. Come on, guys, terrible, but it doesn't matter.
Yeah,
it doesn't matter because he's got a story. He's got something that he wants to say. He's actually a brilliant writer, right? And that connects with you. So does it then?
Yeah.
The voice goes out the window.
It's the, going back to like the Pharrell conversation, right? It's how the inflection or what they're doing kind of makes that person feel. And it's funny you bring that up because even Pharrell said on that podcast. So now I'm just like, look, broken record, you guys are that you guys need it. You guys are welcome. Like we're gonna send some more people to go listen to Broken Record podcast. But like it was when he was talking about how he didn't expect on the song that he did with the guys that wear the helmets.
Oh, yeah. When it's right now, I'm going through 3 or 4 of them, and that's
okay. It was man, it's gonna Get Lucky. Get Lucky.
Yeah.
Was the name of the track, and he was like, he went and recorded it, and he didn't expect his vocals to stay on it, right? And they called him back and like, oh, we're gonna use your vocals. He's like, oh, cool. And then he talks about this song that he did, Beautiful. I think that's what it's either with this, I think it was Snoop Dogg. And he was like, he hated his voice on there. He goes, dude, I thought it was pitchy. I thought it was all this or whatever. Like, I thought it was horrible. And he goes, but yet came out one of like the best selling records. And he was just like,
yep.
To your point, right? It's not necessarily always about like the quality of like the voice is just, it was compelling. The beat was catchy. It made people feel a certain way,
Right.
right? They felt good when they heard it, right?
Oh, yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think it's one of those where it's like, hey, like this song is out and it's on the radio. And it's
Yeah.
like karaoke style. It's like, well, I can sing like that too, right? So now anybody can sing it, right? So
I read this interview with Ray Charles one time, and I don't remember the producer, but he was a pretty renowned producer, but he'd never worked with Ray. And they do a take, and this actually, I think the producers actually they're both telling the story. And he hits the button. He's like, "Hey Ray," he's like, "Your voice cracked, as you came out of that." And then Ray pushes the button. He goes, "I know, I know. Like, leave it."
right.
Because he was mature in his career at that point.
Yeah.
You not to say no, don't make that perfect. Like
Right.
that cracking that's the what is Usher has a word that greasiness. That's what Usher called it. Right? Whatever you want, that grind, that grit, whatever you want to call it. That's the where you can. There's this great interview. I'm gonna switch genres for a second. I remember seeing a series of interviews about Johnny Cash, right? And people who really liked him as a songwriter. And I think that it was an interview with Marty Stewart, right? Another country artist. And he said, I saw him in concert, right? So Marty must have been young at that point. And he was clearly like, his voice was not good. Like he was probably up all night smoking cigarettes and whatever, right? So he's like, and it was one of the best concerts ever because this is what he said. And I'm going to paraphrase. He said, like, it felt like you could reach in and touch his vocal cords with your fingertips. Because it's that raw. He's like, so it was not like you would never record that and put it out. Like maybe you would today. He's like, that would have never gotten past. But he said, but it was so gripping because you could feel the emotion that he was doing. Yeah. And that's what gets people in, whatever.
That's what it is, man. It's look, I think it's been, and I'm going to butcher the same, but right, we make decisions on emotion, not logic.
100%. Yeah. There's great research now that just confirms that over and over and over again, right? That it's first and foremost emotionally driven. And then very quickly after that, in most cases, right, we then, the thinking part sort of kicks in and we can spend a tremendous amount of time explaining to you why we've been that really, really rational decision. And, I think particularly in Western culture, we struggle with letting things go. Right. And so I think there's other philosophies and ways of thinking about that a little bit more like Bruce said, like, I want to be like the water. That whole concept of like, just go with it, because that's the thing. And so it's okay to be like, hey, that was worthy because emotion drives us to do phenomenal things.
Oh, yeah.
You don't want to be like, oh, I got to keep it like tamped down over here. Like, but like, it's a, how do you find that balance and be aware? Hey, so I think that's good to just make people aware that like, hey, you have two different thinking systems, right? And fast and slow, and there's different constructs about that, but yeah, it's emotionally driven, and that's cool, right? That's the connection, right?
So two things. Like one is there's a topic I want to get to, but you brought something up, and I think you'll appreciate this. So you brought up Bruce Lee. So there's a series on HBO Max called Warrior. Right. And so if you don't know much about Bruce Lee, or if you're a Bruce Lee fan, like you'll remember that. So when he quick little story, I promise, and I'll make it quick, C3 Squad. But
this is the goal,
Bruce
man.
Lee, I know. So Bruce Lee got casted for Kung Fu, right, originally. And then, this was back at a time when which fortunately we're going to say this a lot with American history, but
be a leading man, right?
Exactly. Right. To be, Asian, right. And specifically Chinese can be a leading man. And so they didn't want him in the role. And so he came up with this idea for his own show, right, that unfortunately he never got a chance to, kind of make happen or whatever. And so this, the backstory to this series on HBO Max is this was, I don't know if it's an adaptation or it's based on like what he wanted to create because his daughter kind of oversaw like a lot of the production and stuff in there. So I've just now heard about it. Haven't seen it. I want to check it out. I'm a huge Bruce Lee fan. Always have been. Partly because, my last name was Lee. So he was like, oh, Bruce Let me. And I was like, who the hell is that as a kid? And I was like, all right, let me go figure out who this guy is.
Right.
And I was just like, oh, okay, well, yeah, man. Call me Bruce Lee all you want
to. Have you seen the 30 for 30 on him from ESPN?
I have not.
Dude, you got to check it out, man.
Good? Okay.
Yeah. Right. I don't want to spoil it for you.
Okay.
Because basically what you said, you're gonna love it, and you'll be heartbroken too, because they talk through. There's a lot of first-hand material, and his wife and his daughter are in it.
Oh,
So
nice.
looking back, of course, but you get a really great insight into, like, I don't want to, but you see that struggle that he went through, and then also just to still rise above it. I mean,
Right.
it's really testament to his character. I mean,
Cool.
it's really
I'm
cool.
gonna check
Yeah.
it out. All right,
Yep.
we're gonna take a break real quick, and then when we come back, I'm gonna ask uh Dutch what he thinks about this following idea. So, should CISOs be licensed?
Oh man, I saw that. Okay.
We'll get this pause right after
All
this.
right. Cool.
Hey, what's up, Street D Squad? Here to tell you about the Jumpstart Awards brought to you by On the Corner Media Group and also Uber Ether. So, super excited to partner with Uber Ether on this. And basically, the Jumpstart Awards are a set of awards geared towards helping minorities or women get into the cybersecurity or tech space. The winners of the awards get, three of the recipients will get full year's access to Coursera.org to take whatever courses that they want to towards getting into the career. And three other members will get a 6 months membership, completely paid for by us. This is our chance to give back to the community and get people coming into this great tech field. So originally when we posted this last fall, we said that the deadline was going to be December 31st, but we decided to extend it and just keep it open. And we're going to keep doing this until we give away awards to all 6 participants. And then I think we're probably going to come back and do it again. But for now, you can head to onthecorner.us, click on the Jumpstart Awards, find out all the information about how to enter and spread the word. So we're looking to, like I said, give back to this community and get somebody the chance and the access that they need. Thanks, C3 Squad. Back to the show. All right, so we're back, and yeah, man. So I know when I saw this question, I was like, I want to talk to Dutch about this because I know if he hasn't had a conversation about it, he's at least thinking about it. So and I now I'm blanking on where I saw it, but it was this question that was posed about CISOs. Actually, Defense in Depth podcast. This is where I got it from.
Yeah, exactly.
And
it was Alan Alford.
Yeah. So should CISOs be licensed? And you start to thinking about it, financial professionals, tax professionals. I mean, contract. I mean, you just start thinking about there's all these areas where there's some kind of liability.
Right.
There's a professional kind of license there to give you that third party accountability. And so kind of pose the question. And so I wanted to get your take on that, right? What do you think when you hear that? Like, such CISOs have to get a license before you run somebody's, security organization.
Yeah. So my visceral reaction was hell no, right? Honestly. But then I went like, okay, but this is a legit question, right? I think, and then I think I don't remember, and there's a ton of people who responded to that. And now I'm thinking of the post, right? Gary Hayslip, who we all know is brilliant and very engaging, made some really, really awesome comments about it as well. I think for me personally, we lack the maturity today to be at that point. And here's why I say that, right? So even the CIO role is still relatively new, right? The CIO role by name, right, was really driven by a book that came out in 1981, and there's a white paper kind of commensurate in the same time frame. And they were they were asking the question like, hey, because they were really coming out, if you think about timing, it predates even me and you, David. It was database, right? And there was this fork in the road in 1981. The white paper was on should a CIO be a technician, a technical manager, or should it be a people manager? And then the book went, of course, into more deep. The book was unrelated, but the timing was the same, where they were talking about this is the new role. So even the CIO role, so that's 1981. Okay, now let's fast forward. So Katz was by title the first CISO, right? That's 1994. Okay, 13 years later. But as you well know, it was still a decade later until most companies, and still many today, smaller don't have CISOs, right? So from my perspective, I haven't looked it up. We could go do that research. I don't know how long we've had CFOs, but it is much longer. So I just think there's much more maturity there. I would be afraid that if we came up with a standard today and then hardcore force that to be like, you must have this, or I don't know, you can't, if you're a public company, you must have, right? It's one of those aspirational things. I think that might have been kind of Gary's train of thought that we should strive towards that. But I would be concerned that at this stage, it wouldn't do as much good as it could. You know what I mean? Because we're still settling on what's the role, right? What do you expect, right? And there's different, again, and there will always be different constructs, but I mean, there's a whole, like, which type of CISO are you? And there's the 7 types, and there's another one that says there's 4. And then some people make just are you post breach or not? And I think those are all fine, because what it means is people are thinking through that.
Right.
What does it mean to be the CISO? And so for me, I'm still using the analogy of, hey, look, like, I came from a big family. When we moved from the kids table to the adult table at Thanksgiving, man, that was a cool day. Yeah, right. And so I say, like, and I mean this with love and kind of like that CISOs have made it to the adult table.
Right.
And still and that's really the forward-leaning companies, or companies, to your point, that inherently, not even that they have more risk, but they're really aware of their risk, right?
Right.
So government, public sector, financial services, they're very aware of that risk. And so they tend to be leaning really hard into these frameworks, right? Certifications, as they should, right? And so they often kind of lead us, the rest of the enterprise industry and NGOs and charities, et cetera, will kind of follow that. I just think it's too soon, but it's probably a valid exercise to start saying, what would that baseline look like? Like, what would you need to be able to demonstrate? Because I think it is fair to say, well, there's a set of domain expertise that you should have that's just a minimum, like a CPA.
Right.
But again, not all CFOs are CPAs, right? Or I know there's more than one certification, but that's a common one everybody know, right? So, and you're seeing that, right? I mean, so you don't have a standard governing body at this point, right? So, I mean, you know, people are validly so certified CISOs today. There's multiple, I think, valid education streams to do that. I couldn't judge one or the other, and so I'll just presume that there's good stuff happening there.
Yeah.
But we're back to, like, how does most of that stuff get driven, right? If an industry inherently doesn't do it on their own, which does happen sometimes, right? Then usually the government does have to be that kind of that forcing function, right? So I'll give you an example, right? It's the American Psychological Association, the reason that they don't make judgments that are of not their clients is because they did that, right? And it did turn out well. Like, actually, really no harm ultimately done, but they step back and they're like, ooh, like, we can't, like, I can't just, like, read a newspaper article about Dutch and then, you know, diagnose XYZ. Like, that's not okay. So they actually, to their credit, kind of stepped back and did that on their own. We're like, hey, we need to come up with some guidelines of when we're speaking publicly, right? But there's a triggering event, right, for that. Yeah. In other cases, like we've talked about before, and our friend Bird talks about this, right? I talk about seatbelts, you know, and I'm like, hey, you guys think that we enacted the law and then it all just happened? That is not what happened. What happened was an insurance company, because it was monetarily meaningful to them, they said, hey, hold up, people. There's a law on the books and you're not enforcing it. I mean, that's what actually happened, right? And this is a great example of the emotional element that you and I talked about before, right? Because the CDC keeps those kinds of stats, right? So if you go back to the 80s in this time frame, if you ask people, hey, David, do you think seatbelts are a good safety mechanism and they help save lives? Like, over 80% of the people said yes. Well over. You know how many people were wearing seatbelts? Less than 20%.
Right.
And this is just the nature. And so, like, rather than fighting it, and saying, what's wrong with these people? Like, they're people, like, because that's just how people are, right? They have to something has to happen for them to intrinsically then start to adopt it, right? And now, like, you know, like, I can't imagine my kids would think not to wear the seatbelts, because how many thousands of times have they heard my wife or I say, put your seatbelt on? Like, it's just automatic. Right. So they wouldn't even go through the whole, like, why should I wear a seatbelt? But I'm old enough, sadly to say, that I remember when it became a thing, and going out to my dad's beat up blue pickup truck. And he's like, we got to dig the seatbelts out, which is nutty. And I'm like, I don't know how old it was, 5, 6, 7 or something like that at the time. And for the record, my dad's generally like a super safety conscious person.
Right.
Like, we had a fire extinguisher in the kitchen, and like, he was a safety minded person. And yet, because the cultural norm wasn't to do it, that people just didn't do it. And people underestimate the amount of inertia, right, that there is, just because that's just the way people are, right? So you have to, you could tell people a thing is a really smart thing to do and they'll still just ignore it. Right. and so will I. And so will you, right? I mean, just that's human nature. So you have to come at things from a behavioral understanding, right? So we all know that passwords are not the most secure way of doing this. We get it. Like everybody knows that. Okay. But you got to find a simple and or compelling replacement for that, for people to go, oh, this is important. I really need to do this.
Look at it's still very much stick carrot, right? I mean,
Yeah.
everything kind of comes down to that, right? You've got to be, you're either going to be motivated by something or driven by something,
Right.
right? At the end of the day. And so the more that you, instead of fighting that, right, if you just kind of accept it, and the more you put things in place to kind of to go that nature, you find that, it gets accepted more, right? And so specifically, so, and I'll give my take real quick, and then we'll
Let's hear.
our,
This was your question. So
no, you're good. We'll head into our last step for the segment, but like, I thought of it more of a, not a, yes, we need to do this and let's go make sure that CISOs get licensed, right? But I thought of it more of a, let's have a discussion about accountability, right? It's more a thought point to get out there and start talking about, like, because as soon as you're talking about licenses, because you go right where we need to go to. So if we're going to license them, by what standard? What's the standard? What do we agree on? What are the lessons on? What are we looking at, right? And then who's holding them accountable? What does that mean? And it's just, to me, it's more those conversations in themselves drive out more than if we ever decide that, yes, we want to do it or not, because we started answering some really good questions and start to develop some things there to go, hey, look, maybe we'll never get to this point, but at least we can just start saying, hey, let's have some standards that we hold each other accountable by, right? Let's get some standardized to say, what does it take to be a CISO, versus people just going, yeah, Dutch has been here for 20 years and he ran the IT shop, we'll make him CISO, right? Like, okay. Like it kind of starts those conversations and kind of gets us going down that path.
So then we gotta go back to to one of these big questions to me is who owns risk, right? And so we have the recent history so far is not very positive on this. And what I mean is that, again, because the role is new, right? So I mean, I cannot overstate that enough. The role is still fairly new, right? That CISOs, for me, in my view, do not own risk from a liability standpoint. Now, if you have gross negligence, just like you or I, if we were in charge of cutting the trunks on for the Christmas trees, and we cut somebody, we were gross, that's different. Okay, right. So accept that for a second. But outside of that, from my viewpoint, it's not helpful mentally to frame it as the CISO and then their staff owns the risk, right? The business owns risk, right? The board sets risk appetite. That's their job. So like, I mean, again, we're back to like, how do you define it? But I mean, if I look at the NACD, which is the handbook that most corporate directors look at, it tells you right there, right? Like, it's your job to do oversight, and you kind of have to back it up to stuff that people understand. Like, look, we have insurance because of the shipping industry, right? That's where that came from, right? We've been managing risk for hundreds of years, right? This is just a different lens, a different flavor, a different type of risk. So because there's a new type of risk, you don't suddenly go, oh, now David owns that. You're like, whoa, wait a minute.
Right.
David will be responsible to manage it and to mitigate it and to inform the other executives about it and to disagree, because it's your domain expertise. In the same way that I would expect the CFO to say, no, that's not how Sarbanes-Oxley works. I don't think you understand the implications of that. And then hopefully I would be quiet and let them explain, oh, okay, yeah, I didn't know that, right? I had no idea, right? Or the chief marketing officer, or chief personnel officer, whatever. So I'm afraid, again, at this not tenuous, but at this early stage, to
absolutely
put that on the CISO, then that would be like anyway, David owns that. So, sorry, we had a breach and we're firing David. We're back to firing David. And that doesn't solve, again, accepting gross negligence of some sort, like that doesn't solve the issue. Now you just have a new person who's new,
right?
Who has to come in and solve it, right? And so to me, and this isn't about pinning the tail on the donkey per se, right? It's where does it belong, right? So you can delegate your authority, you cannot delegate your responsibility. That's just like a military truism. That's how we think of it. It's the same thing for executive leaders, right? So like you could delegate your authority down to so that people can go do in the frameworks that you give them to go do stuff, or else like you'd have to make every decision.
Right.
And delegate that authority downwards, but you're still responsible.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, and to your point, like overall as an industry, we're still just very young.
Yeah.
right? Like there just hasn't been a lot of time for us to two things, right? There hasn't been a lot of time for us to really understand and get standards. And then we're in an industry that and I'll say this without any kind of research, but I don't think there's a lot of other industries that compare to like that changes so rapidly, right? I mean, think about it. Like when you started computing, right? And so it was like, okay, we're going to start to build computers. And then we started to hit this rapid scale of, computers went from buildings to offices to now in our phones to freaking devices this big. Like how we create software. So like it was like every 20 years are changing. Now 10, now
Mhm.
5. I mean, it's to the point where like, I mean, at least in software, where every 3 years there's something new that's coming out. So while we're overall as an industry kind of young, right, we're also constantly evolving like super, super fast, right? So anything that we even want to put in place and say this is the way it's going to be done in 5 years is now obsolete. And there's no way anybody would build anything like that. So yeah, man, super. It's to me, it's all interesting questions to drive conversations, so that way we are thinking about these things and they're coming out. So we're gonna take one more break, and when we come back, we're gonna get to the last sip, the infamous segment. We'll be back right after this. Hey, what's up, C3 Squad? I'm back to tell you about my favorite watch company, and that is Bronzeville Watch Company. I absolutely love these watches. In fact, I am waiting on my new piece to arrive today, any minute. I am sitting waiting for the UPS guy to come by and drop off my new piece. But, I love this company. I love the quality of these watches. I've always been a big watch person. So, hey, look, if you are into watches, you definitely need to check them out. It's Bronzeville Watch Company. So that's bronzevillewatchco.com. And of course, obviously, I love the backstory as well. I was able to meet these founders last year, and just the story of the company and the name of Bronzeville Watch Company. So Bronzeville, if you're not aware, was known as the Black Metropolis on Chicago's South Side. And so, the founder really loved the story of that, wanted to bring that back. So always happy to support Black-owned businesses. But Bronzeville Watch Company, you will not be disappointed. Go check them out today. Get your new piece. Tell them the C3 Squad sent you. All right, here we go.
Yeah, that's a good sound. You hear that sound?
Okay, look, we timed this perfectly. We're actually at the last sip, and I got more. I got about maybe a sip and a half left.
We were jazzed up, man.
Actually, I have to give myself credit. I know, mixed a really
You made
a really good old fashioned there, but way to go, man. Makes me another one. But okay, so the last sip. Ask everybody this question, right? And it comes down to, what is it that you want your legacy to be, Dutch?
Oh man, you see, and I even knew you were going to answer that question. And I think, does everybody have the same reaction? By the way, we need to come up with one and put you on the spot, right? Because it sounds so grand, like it's hard to do that and not feel like you're being ridiculous. But I think I have it, like, for me, it's easy in the sense that I have kids. So if those kids turn out to be good people, that's probably the most good that I could do in the world,
Right.
honestly. I mean, that's like something that I think about a lot. I hope that if we're sort of looking backwards in the mirror, right, that I've been a great spouse. That my wife would say that, not me, that she would say, without duress, like nobody's twisted her arm. But no, I mean, I think about those things a lot, and then I hope that I'm fortunate, like a lot of folks in our space, right, to have a military background. So I hope that the things that I did there were impactful. The people that I trained, the people I work with. I certainly was impacted by so many other people who pushed me forward in a positive way. So I hope that had a lot of impact, and I hope that the final coda, as it relates to this part of it, right, kind of the work life thing, is that I was able to help other people. Right.
Yeah.
I would love to help more people get into this space, kind of to your point, Davis, a burgeoning space. There's so much room for people to come in. I think we can do so much better, right? From across so many spectrums. One, DEI, right? We have such a long way to go in DEI. For military veterans, we could do such a better job. And then I'm sensitive to, like, I was a single parent for many, many years, like people returning to work for whatever the reason might have been, and my undergrad is in history, right? So I have a soft spot in my heart, admittedly, for social sciences and the other areas, right? The fine arts. I think that those things can inform and help us solve problems that we couldn't maybe brute force solve with zeros and ones in the technical world.
Look, and it's it's so interesting, right? I've got a year's worth of asking people this question, and it just hit me. I think what I'm going to do is I'm gonna chop up like everybody's answer, kind of
Yeah.
like a little mixed video too. But it's funny, everybody has the same reaction too. They go, "Oh, what am I gonna do?" But I just, you know what? And it's look, there's never any wrong or right answer. It's really what I loved about that question is just, what it just it makes you think, right? I always mess up when I try and quote the Jimmy V speech or whatever, but
Such a great.
you laugh, you cry, you think, right? It's a good day, man. You should always have something that just causes you to think and really, ponder what it is that you want out of this, life that we live on this spinning ball in the middle of this galaxy, right? So, look, man, I appreciate the time, and Dutch. Let me tell you, man, you are well on your way to meeting those legacy goals, man. I'm so glad that
Kind of you. I appreciate that, man.
I'm so glad you met.
I do a bunch of these too. I know you like said, but I'm so thrilled to be on here because I have such a good connection with you, and I appreciate you that you're just a genuine dude.
Yeah,
right. I really appreciate it a lot, man. I'm happy to be on here.
Yeah, no, happy to have you on, man. So, and we're gonna C3 Squad. Don't worry, Dutch will be back. He doesn't know it yet. I have a specific panel discussion set up. That literally, like when I drew it out, I drew a square, and I was like,
I have a challenge for you. Are you ready?
Oh, what's up? Yeah.
Either next time or one of these times, the 10 greatest rappers of all time.
Oh, dude, easy.
No, we're gonna disagree.
I know we are.
It's gonna be awesome.
All right, yeah, no, we'll get that one set up too. I still want to do our hip hop panel, and I just gotta get everybody together in the schedules. All right. Well, all right, C3 Squad, you guys know what it is. To the next cocktail, to the next conversation. You guys stay safe out there. Cocktails, Code, and Conversation is brought to you by the On the Corner Media Group. Check us out at onthecorner.us for more